Hello and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 886th New Social Environment. I'm Carolyn, a programs associate here at the Rail, and I have the extreme pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Dineo Seshee Bopape, Martha Joseph, and Jill H. Casid. We are thrilled to welcome poet Gabriel Ramirez here to close today's program. Before we get started, the Brooklyn Rail acknowledges Black Lives Matter. Here in New York, we are on Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. We recognize land acknowledgements are not a replacement for necessary decolonial work, but serve as a reminder of place, of the legacies of dispossession and enslavement that sustain and enrich the stolen land we're speaking from. And now to introduce today's guests and host. Dineo Seshee Bopape was born in the year of the Golden Rooster, 1981 on a Sunday. If she were Ghanaian, her name would be Akosua, Akos for short. Bopape lives in Southern Africa. She has shown her work internationally in numerous solo exhibitions, most recently at Pirelli HangarBicocca, Milan. She co-represented South Africa at the Venice Biennial in 2019. And you can check the chat for a full bio of Dineo's. Martha Joseph is a curator and writer specializing in contemporary art and performance. At the Museum of Modern Art, she is the Phyllis Ann and Walter Borton Assistant Curator of Media and Performance, and she has organized exhibitions, commissions, and performances. She is on the curatorial team for the Marie-José and Henry Kravis Studio, MoMA Space for Live and Time-Based Art. And our host today, scholar and artist Jill H. Casid, is professor of visual studies in the departments of art history and gender and women's studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Casid is currently completing Necro Landscaping, the first part of a two-book project on form at the edges of life. Casid is the author of Scenes of Projection, Recasting the Enlightenment Subject. And we are so thrilled to have you all here joining us today. Thank you. I'll turn it over to you, Jill.
Oh my goodness, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us and making this convo electric. It's really an honor to gather to think together out loud and in public. And before we begin, I'd like to add to the acknowledgements to say that I do most of my work, including preparation for this conversation, from my position at a public land grab institution in Wisconsin, a state that occupies the unceded territory of the Ho-Chunk Nation. And as I discuss in an article for Texte zur Kunst on the unsettling and art historical call of acknowledgement in the Necrocene, I end all such acknowledgements with a challenge to us all that without consideration of land back and abolition of both the carceral order and heteropatriarchal racial capitalism, as well as reparation, acknowledgement is never enough. So I want to start us off talking about sound, but also particularly in verb gerund form, so sounding. Dineo, the call issued, we could say in and also by your work to see beyond the visible and listen past the obviously audible as a way to do things with being undone in the wake of enslavement and colonization has really haunted me ever since I first encountered your installation Untitled of Occult Sensibility Feelings at the Berlin Biennial in 2018. And I want to give a shout out here to River Bullock, who has also worked with Nina Simone's performance of Feelings at the Montreux Jazz Festival. And in River's work, she thinks about listening as a technology of relation that I think speaks to how, Dineo, you work with sound, or better yet, how your work sounds through active living material. sound and the more active sounding through bodies. And we should be thinking here so much in your work about bodies as not just human, but also and especially elemental. That is, this sounding in your work is through wind, water, and soil. And this sounding plays a special role in your work as medium, in that occulted spiritual sense of being conductive, as an active vector for dreaming, for remembering. That I love in your work is always as much political as spiritual. And in your site responsive adaptation of Ratu Lakale Fela Leafila by Love is Alive, is Alive, is Alive for MoMA, this sounding is choreographed across 3 screens, but also especially multiple speakers that make the installation spatial, of course, but also really thinking here about making space with sound that turns the experience into one that's not just immersive, but we could think about it as trembling through material, which works to include us in the sense of how we sense in and through the vibration that happens to our bodies. So that was a buildup to wanting to ask you about this sounding work that calls to the ocean and calls on its spirits. And to set us up to talk about that, I'd like to share with everyone in the Zoom room a 2-minute clip of the 3-channel video, Ocean, What If No Change Is Your Desperate Mission? That's at the center of the project at MoMA. So we're going to play now a couple of minutes from this 3-channel video. And one quick correction. So the title of the video that we just had a chance to experience, just a couple of short minutes of, shares the title of the exhibition. So Leratu Laka Leapila Leapila, My Love is Alive, is Alive, is Alive. And having now had a chance to tremble a bit, I was hoping, Dineo, that you might also perhaps talk here as well about the importance of the places where you recorded, the role of the sounds of wind and ocean for this sounding work, and your work with Tlokwe Suhume, who you describe importantly as a musician healer.
Hi everyone, thank you all for being here. Yeah, and thank you for Brick and Rail for hosting this, and Moma as well, and Jill, and yeah, also all the unseen people as well. Yeah, Jill, you asked me about the sounding and the when first arriving in some of the sites, it took me some time to feel how I was sounding, what the sound that was happening in me was. So I had to take time to listen to the water that was in front of me or around me. Some of the places I visited were in the coastal regions of Ghana, different parts of Ghana along the coast, and in Senegal as well. Orleans, Richmond, Virginia as well. Yeah, also Cape Town in South Africa. Spending time listening to the waves, listening to the wind, recording, yeah, both. Yeah, yeah. I don't know how what else to say about that. Um, I guess also with the recording of it, the recording of the sound against the microphone as well, the harshness of the wind hitting up on the unprotected microphone at times. Experimented different ways of recording it. So there's sometimes an interruption, discontinuous flow. But that also creates certain rhythms as well, which in the editing reel then also help to figure out what to do next. So they also direct the process of the editing. And with the Tlokwe Suhume, I first heard his music by chance. I walked into a record store and saw a cover of a CD of his, took it home, listened to store, got all his records, went back home, listened to them all, tried to find who this person was, and finally found him. When I found him, I just cried in front of him in an embarrassing way. But yeah, I was quite moved by the music and the messages in the music as well. And yeah, all the history that he refers to in the music. Yeah, in a really eloquent and generous way. Yeah. And he heals through music, and yeah, he's also a farmer, lives on a farm, so sometimes he also makes music with his goats and yeah, the other animals on his farm. Yeah.
Dineo,
Thank you so much. Yeah.
sorry, Jill. I just wanted to chime in and say, Dineo, I think so often about some of our early writings around the exhibition and some of the texts that we were going back and forth about. And starting with sound for this talk feels so right, like really prioritize listening or this sensual experience that's about the auditory. And there are, of course, other senses engaged in the exhibition, but coming together and listening together really feels right. And I think too about the word incantation, which you've used to describe not just the sound, but actually the whole piece and how it operates as a framework. There's you do a really good job of kind of situating and creating a ritual space through sound, which then has the ability to both hold us and also allow us to tremble. I liked that term, Jill, because there's something that's both very forceful and also very vulnerable in that word that I think speaks to a lot in this particular piece.
Thanks for that, Martha. I'll also add in that also part of the meditation of making the sound as well, while swimming in the water or floating inside the water, having my ears inside and just listening to the drum beat of my heartbeat as well, the doof 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 doof. And that's a sound that's usually used in incantations in Southern Africa, or throughout the whole continent also. So that also helped prepare the sound, the journey of the sound as well. Yeah.
I also am so grateful to you for getting us or giving us a chance to experience how much you work with your body as an instrument, ritual and in all the material ways, and so your voice, but also what's deeper than voice coming through even in this conversation. So thank you for allowing us to feel that, and that also I think sets us up really well to think about the way that this sounding and the incantation of the ritual space relates to the way you treat the video aspect of the work, and the way that is shown. So I wanted to talk here about how you materialize the screen, and the project from MoMA responds to the site, adapting a project that's long in the making, parts of which began at the ICA in Richmond, and the video work was commissioned and produced by TBA 21 Academy and Pirelli HangarBicocca, shown at Ocean Space in the Venice Biennial in 2022 and in Milan in 22-23. And we've got slides queued up here so that you can walk us through the development and what's been added, what's changed for the MoMA project. And in looking at these, I wanted to mark how you're certainly known for much, but for many, you're especially associated with a use of unprocessed material, and particularly for soil, which you use, I think, in a really exciting set of ways, but I'm especially interested in talking about how you use soil to materialize the screen. So at Venice, the soil backs and props the screen, and it's described there as 3 screens of sedimentary rock. And at MoMA, the screens offer, as I understand it, a limestone surface for the video projection, which I experienced as an enclosure of walls treated with soil that we first really smell before, at least for me, anything else. I felt like I walked into the space, and the first thing that woke me up to the space was my smelling it even before I was seeing or hearing. And that creates a sense of watching and listening in a kind of ground cave, with the effect of making the screen feel not just tactile, like, something we can touch, but also elemental, grounded, and importantly located. So as I understand it, it matters very much where the soil comes from, where it's sourced, that is from sites marked by histories of dispossession in the still present and active unfoldings of colonization and enslavement. And as I've written myself on histories of technology for projecting an image in scenes of projection, a key aspect of the political spiritual working of materializing the screen in your work feels tied directly to the assertion of sovereignty in an over projection, taking it back to something that Western histories gets placed as pre-modern, as in the way a projected image can be generated simply out of just a hole in a dark space, like a cave. So, with that, Dineo and Martha, I would be so excited to hear you walk us through the materialization of the screen and what that does. And Martha, particularly, I'd also be interested to hear, but all freely from both of you, about any particular challenges in making this happen at the Museum of Modern Art.
Thanks, Jill. So one of the things when thinking about presenting the work was the water's elemental relationship to other elements, the element of soil, dust, earth, rock, all those being I guess one material, one could say, the rock in different forms. The rock also having the memory, also ancient memory of the earth, and remembering through deep time bones of the world, or the bones of the universe. One could also say. What would these two memories, the memories that water contains, and the memories contained in rock, what could the relationship there be? And then also the relationship with the light that's being transmitted from the projector itself. Yeah, so there was a test or questions that were happening through me, or as I was also editing and preparing the work. Yeah, there were also other elements in the Venice iteration that I'd also wanted to include. Wood, sure, I can't remember the other elements that were there. Clay was also there, clay from Jamaica. The film itself was shot in mainly Jamaica. The visual part of it, and some shots from Colombia as well. What else was there? There were also herbs as part of the work in Venice and the Venice iteration. In the MoMA iteration, there are fabrics, and then there's also smell in the space. River rocks that you see there in a circular formation. There are some clumps made of clay ceramic, which you see, a few of there, 3 in this image. There's also a carpet, a blue carpet, that also helps to host people, so people are comfortable and are able to watch through. Because I also like to sit when watching a film and take my time and not get tired. So I wanted to also have that for people. The color also referencing the deep blue of the ocean as well, of being deep inside or being drawn inside. The other element that Jill mentioned is also the soil that surrounds the walls. To also hold whoever's in the space, also to hold the rocks together as well, to hold the water. Yeah, I hadn't imagined it as an underwater cave, but I guess it could read as that. Yeah. Yeah, in the HangarBicocca iteration, we had some walls, curved wall images on the slide. Yeah, and the people sat in front of the walls, and the films occupied the full walls. So these float in the space, and yeah, and one is surrounded by the sound as well.
Perhaps we could show some images of the Venice and Milan presentation so that you can get a sense of how it's kind of changed each time. Yeah, this is your group exhibition, or sorry, your solo exhibition at HangarBicocca. And if we go to the next slide, this is the exterior or opposite side of the screens with a very thick mud or soil application. And then if we advance to the next slide, this is the interior of the circular court that you're welcomed into when you're experiencing it. And Dineo, one thing I really liked about this presentation was the physical proximity, the physical touch on a single screen, with the back having the soil and then the image of the water and the I believe it was marble dust on this projection surface. So I mean, we have all of those elements at moment 2 in very close proximity, but this kind of conversation across soil, water, and rock, like in a very haptic and intimate way. And this was the first presentation in Venice at Ocean Space, and each space that you've shown this work in has been quite different. And I know we used the term site responsive to kind of refer to the fact that multiple elements have changed in each presentation. And a lot of the elements that you kind of mentioned, if we advance to the next slide, you see the kind of wood trellis that you mentioned, Dineo. We talked a lot about the importance of these materials being sourced locally in each exhibition space. And then further at MoMA, showing this work on US soil for the first time, what additional resonances are really brought out in our presentation and how we can engage them. Specifically, it will get to this through the collaboration with Minokan.
It becomes then a collaboration with the land where the work is situated as well. So including the limestone for the surface of the screen then becomes also the conversation with all the sediments of time recorded by those rocks, by the and the dust.
Yeah, time ends up doing something very interesting in the space. There's this geological time and ancestral time that you're engaging with materially. And then there's also the looping of the video, which is, I believe it's roughly 16 minutes long, but while you're watching it, it's not always apparent what the quote beginning or end is. So you kind of feel very held in this space, and it feels quite expansive, almost both timeless and very local simultaneously.
Well, this awakening us or sensitizing us to the connections between what we have arguably toxically learned to separate and need new ways of learning to connect geologic time and different versions of historical time, ancestral time, but then also the ways that dispossession works to erase presence, and how you counter that, particularly in the ways that you're collaborating. But also I was tempted to offer the term co-conjuring as a way of getting at how, again, this ritual and spiritual work is also highly political, and that these have also been problematically separated. And so I'd love to build here on what's happening in the way that you sound through the material and materialize the screen, to talk about how the sculptural parts of the installation, that of course include the materialized screen, work to choreograph and redraw the space of the exhibition for ritual and as resistance, by focusing on how you collaborate or co-conjure with descendants of enslaved Africans, and with the active agency of, we could say, spirits in and through the vitality of the soil that you're also incorporating into clay. A vital aspect of the MoMA project, right, is the deepening of your collaboration with the Minokan Descendant Collective, descendants of enslaved persons at the Minokan Plantation in Warsaw, Virginia, that was built by slave labor on land stolen from the Rappahannock tribe, as the home built by forced displacement, and enslaved labor as the home of one of the, we could say, the condensation of the terrible origins of the United States experiment. So one of the signatories of the US Declaration of Independence. And I think a key aspect of what's happening too in the installation is that you don't name that signatory, you name the descendants of the members of the Minokan collective who worked with you. And the ones that you worked with, right, who are named in the installation, with them you work to create these powerfully charged sculptures out of Minokan landscape sourced clay that carries remembered resistance as much as trauma and dispossession, though also both. And I want to tag back to an earlier project, Les Relais, footnotes from 2017, that piece that in parentheses is titled "The Struggle of Memory Against Forgetting." And titling that, you use the Sepedi word "les relais," that literally translated would be active dust. And that's a really, I think, a wonderful word and phrase for our talking about what you're doing with this potent combination of active dust and using this landscape sourced clay to make these sculptures by the impress of making a fist. And so I'm especially interested in how you're collaborating with the descendants, but also the active dust, and through the active dust with the ancestors.
Thanks, Jill. Sure. For the installation, the footnotes, the struggle of memory against forgetting. I had worked with African immigrants working in Vienna, Austria in 2017 or so. Yeah, and that's where that was the second iteration of the process of clenching clay in the fist, allowing the clay to take the memory of the person who's holding the clay, a reconnection between that dust that's coagulated, that's sedimented into another body, which is of also of various elements, including the soil itself or the earth itself. In this work, I had included stories of contact between Europeans and Africans along coastal areas around the continent. Yeah, when people said yes or no in their interactions. And from this process of working with the clay and with the immigrants, I had also invited the descendants of the Minokan plantation to also process the clay, I guess, together in a way. The clay where the ancestors had lived, had worked, had toiled, had loved, had slept, had cried, had eaten. The soil that had held them and also supported them in different ways as well also. Yeah, what does it do to then remember that for the soil itself and then also for the descendants? The previous, if we could go back to the previous slides, because the ones before the set, please go back to perhaps number 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Yeah. So this was in Richmond at the ICA, and the work was called Ile Aya Moyan Doc, which is in different languages, in Ga and Wolof, in Nguni, I can't remember what the fourth one was, but all together reference water, air, fire, earth, referring to those minerals, and how might the collaboration have been between the enslaved people and all those elements, going from the African continent onto the boats, and then also onto the land that that they lived in, the land that also received them in some way as well, and supported their survival, and those who survived, and also those who didn't survive, whose bones then are held inside this earth, this memory, these sediments of time. What does it do to then massage that time through the hand, massage the different generations also. So these are included in the work, were included in the work in Richmond, Virginia. And then I also invited some of the people who had partook in the process to share those as well in the MoMA process. Because the work, there are two different works, the Ile Aya Moyan Doc and Lerato Lakalia Pela, My Love is Alive, is Alive, is Alive. But they circle around similar stories, memories, histories, projections, processes, threads. So they hold each other up, or they weave into each other. And the process of making this Richmond one also pushed me towards the making of the one that that is now currently at MoMA. They also act as a as a mirror of the person who's making the clumps of rocks, this active dust coming together and becoming this thing that has a different kind of agency in time, a different kind of weight. a different shape also in time. Yeah, and here they're also with animals, animals, figurines of animals that are of the American continent. Yeah, some of the animals and objects were found in thrift stores, so they had been used by other people before. Yeah, carvings of whales, of wolves, of eagles, buffaloes. Oh, another thing of the clumps is that there were also the word that comes to mind is blessed in buffalo milk, sealed or held, knowing the history of the buffalo in the Americas, and the role of the buffalo in the world, in different world cultures as well. Yeah, it's one of well, all animals are sacred, but it's also one of the sacred animals of most lands. Yeah.
Do you also want to add, Dineo, that at least at Richmond and MoMA, and I'm curious if you've operated this way for some of your other works, but the clumps or the hand molds are then returned to the makers at the close of the exhibition?
Yeah. So it was also important that for this particular work, the Ile Ayamoyan Doc, and also My Love is Alive, for those clumps to be returned to the descendants so that they also live with with those rocks, and yeah, and have a relationship directly without me as a bridge. Yeah.
I'm also loving this image of what else clenched hand can do, that description of massaging the clay, and also in the process exchanging energy, memories, in that kneading would be another verb that comes to mind, on the basis of, I feel like the synapse is just when you were just describing it in terms of massage, but there is a particular story that you often tell about the fist as also a kind of signal of a still here-ness. I don't know if you wanted to share if that's pertinent.
Yeah, part of where this the work started was hearing this the story of Robert Sobukwe. This was in 2012, 2013, when I first heard the story. Robert Sobukwe was a political activist from Southern Africa. And he had been imprisoned in Robben Island in isolation, apart from the other prisoners. And when the other prisoners came to the island, not came, but were brought to the island by the apartheid state, they saw Sobukwe from far, and some of the young activists were thinking or wondering whether this now old man, wondering if he had lost his resilience or his power, his strength, because of the isolation, and whether they had washed him out. And they observed him bend down and grab a fistful of soil and raise his fist in the air, and then allow the soil to trickle. If anyone knows the history of South Africa, one knows that it's a history of many things, including violence and violent dispossession of land from indigenous people, African people from there. Yeah, and a lot of people fought for centuries for land, yeah, against occupation, foreign occupation, yeah, against erasure and yeah. Yeah, and it's a process that, well, in 2013 was quite a intense year, because it was also the centenary of one of the land acts that had been passed, and also a build up to the Fees Must Fall movement and the Roads Must Fall movements as well. That also happened, yeah, roughly around then, or momentum was also building for that. Yeah, so the time when these works were also coming about was bubbling a lot socially in South Africa. Yeah, I forgot what the question was before.
No, that's exactly what I wanted you to share with us. And so I kept the prompt open because I didn't want to, yeah, I wanted the story in your words. So thank you so much for, again, in insisting that we understand the way that the spiritual and the ritual is also expressly political in your work, and that seems like a beautiful segue to the really active charged relation to an aspect that is also often and problematically, not much problematic, toxically separated, and that would be dreaming. And so even as I invoke that, I'm also hesitating to speak about the role of dreaming in your work, as I love so many moments of your response to questions that entirely reframes I mean, we're in a different discourse entirely and importantly. So there was this marvelously transporting moment in the recorded Q&A when you're responding at Venice to someone asking you about how you use dreams. And then I'm going to be paraphrasing here, but you completely reframed and also took us, somewhere else in responding, to say, well, we, need to ask, what dream are we in? And in radically questioning, right, the construction of Western rationality and what we're made to take as real, and insisting that this terrible dream of, that I call the necrocene, this regime of cis heteropatriarchal racial capitalism, you draw on the power of dreaming, and also really importantly, as has already come up in our conversation, dreaming beyond the human, so across the personal, the collective, the livingness of land, air, water, rock, to manifest and transport, including how the oceans might conduce a different dream world that we might say is also already here. And you talk about and draw explicitly on what comes to you in your dreams through your travels and work in specific places. And this work is developed in some really exciting circumstances. The work in the Solomon Islands in the Pacific, the Caribbean Sea off the coast of Jamaica, and includes your drawing on the way that some highly charged images, such as the image of scars from lacerations on the back of an African-American man known as Peter, only as Peter, who was also misidentified for centuries in a widely circulating daguerreotype as quote unquote ex-slave Gordon. And yet you take these images and sounds that come to you in this dream work. You also do this transformation of the hard material trace of an excess beyond subjugation that comes through the images, and images such as the one of scarring lacerations. And in doing so, it seems as though you engage in a kind of healing ritual of rebellion by insisting on remembering and transmitting through the scar as much as the impression or massage of the fist. So with that, I was wondering if we could talk about how dreaming conduces responses to the questions by which you frame the project at MoMA. You ask, what do our oceans remember? The shifting of the continents, migrating schools of fish and mammals, the movement of ships transporting enslaved peoples across the Atlantic, the breath of those who sought freedom. And you launch those questions, and in doing so, I'd really love to hear you talk about dreaming.
Thanks, Jill. Sure. So so while in Solomon Islands, I was quite surprised that that the images that were coming to me as I was looking at the waters were images of Peter's back, that the waves, the breaking waves began at different moments to remind me of that. Yeah, what was the water then dreaming for me in that moment? What was then being transmitted to me to tell or to carry to carry out. Yeah, and then also other people who had then came in conversation and then spoke on the side in parallel ways about slavery or the slave trade or colonial entanglements. Yeah, while on the Solomon Islands. Yeah, as though they were also in cahoots with all these images I was also seeing coming up from the water. It took some time to piece together what all these elements meant. So then that process led to another process. Yeah, thinking through the scars and through the waves and through lines and lines of drawing. That then led me to Jamaica. I was invited by TBA Academy in Ocean Space to do research or to come have a show at Ocean Space. But then I felt that I would need to spend some time with the water again to hear. Yeah. And then the listening led me to Jamaica, or that invitation. And whilst there were certain dreams that also came. The song that's heard in the soundtrack is came through a dream. Yeah, that I woke up from quite moved because it had felt like various layers of beings singing this song. And I was somehow witnessing that dialogue or part of it. But who were these beings that were saying that their love is alive, or yeah, what was their dream? Yeah, so the work then became this journey for it. Yeah, for the sound and beings of the waters there in Jamaica, then also yeah, I guess also around the world, in cahoots with them. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah, and
Well, with that, yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. And also dreaming of various generations. One of the image of Peter's back was also paralleled with an image of a pregnant woman, or post-pregnancy, when she's given birth, and the scar tissue, the stretch marks are gathered. So they also kind of look like waves as well of this home having expanded and held this being and then contracted again. Yeah, that relationship also came. Yeah, what is this dream being birthed, or the process that's being birthed? Yeah, yeah. So within a question of whether the violence, and then also the beginning of something else as well, how do those be in relationship together, the beautiful and the painful as well, how to hold them simultaneously, in the flesh, outside of the flesh, in memory, through time, through generations, generations of rock, generations of water, yeah, of people, yeah. Mm.
Thank you so much for elaborating that key palimpsest of the scarring, in that I'm also attuned to how much a feminine that may or may not be attached to female bodies, a feminine that's a force. And I'm reminded here of the work of many, but I'll also do a little shout out here to Fernanda Villarreal Lamosa, who's been thinking about a ritual feminine that can hold as an action as you put it, the painful and the beautiful, but also a force that can generate out of various forms of erosion and forced precarization and dispossession. And I'm just also attuned to how many times that holding as a verb also feels like it's a holding that's also a carrying, and as you put it, also a kind of birthing. I'm wondering, how are we doing on time? Do we have time for another question, or should we segue to Q&A? Carolyn, how?
We're at 2, but if you have another question, Jill, please feel free.
I want to make sure that those who've gathered also have a chance to ask. So, and there may be a moment in which the other question I had in the wings might come up. So as we transition with this excitement to Q&A, we'd like to show just 1 more minute from the film, especially for those of you who may have joined us late, because it's really important to experience the particular sounding and dreaming work that's happening through the film. So as we transition, we're gonna show just 1 more minute.
Yes, and we do encourage anyone, if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand on the screen, and we will call on you. 1 minute.
Oh, it makes me want to clap, but maybe that's thank you so much for queuing us up in that way, Carolyn.
Thank you both. Thank you 3 for this conversation. It's just been so rich. So again, we encourage your questions. I will kick it off with one, if that's all right, Dineo. So I mean, you've addressed this in so many different ways, but I'd love to just hear you speak a bit more about repetition, which is just such an insistence, I find, and maybe even a resistance. I'm not sure if you would use those words, but sort of these, the clumps, the rocks, the title, love is alive, is alive, is alive. There's not one video, but there's multiple, and just would love to hear you speak a bit more, if you would.
Thanks, Carolyn. Sure, I hadn't thought about it while making it, that it was repeating over and over again, but perhaps it was becoming like a mantra and creating a rhythm. Yeah, that the song and also the rhythm of the water feels as though it's repeating, so that it takes one. Yeah, it takes the viewer with them. Them being the process of the video, or the journey of the video. Yeah, with the screens and the sound as well, um to almost remember to play a game with oneself of having seen something, then it occurs again, and recognizing its return, and seeing it again, thinking about what that does to help recall other things also. Yeah, then one also relaxes um into a rhythm that then allows other things to breathe through. Yeah, as in the process of dancing, when one is dancing in a rhythmic way, for hours and hours and hours and hours, then something else quietens, and then um, yeah, I don't have the words for what that thing is that that then activates. Yeah. Mm.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, the refusal to name and it there also feels really important too, in that the ground or effect of what could seem like repetition also arguably activates attention to more subtle differences, or something else to emerge. And I'm also I'm going to be selfish and ask the question that I was also really wanting to ask you, that comes out of some of my own work in terms of thinking about how you alter what so inadequately being described in art theory, criticism, and film theory in terms of spectatorship, and to think about ourselves in relationship to your work as spectators is so grotesquely inadequate. And there's a really exquisite way in which you've really transformed what in my own work I've called the scene of projection to alter spectatorship. And in my work, I've understood the scene of projection as a setup that's as much a psychic one as material, a kind of apparatus that trains us in a violent pedagogy through which we learn to abject and displace the matter of our own vulnerability onto those who are made to carry it for us. Racialized others, feminized others, queered others. And I see your work as, yes, materializing the screen, right? That's where we began, but importantly in a way that helps us become capable of bearing our vulnerability. I mean, that's another way of thinking about that holding environment of the space, so that we're not casting our stuff out onto others who we see as threats, but become potentially capable of using our vulnerability, right? If we were to understand the other side of vulnerability as a capacity to work with a deep interconnectedness, the ocean, the dirt, the soil, inside as much as without. But then, I've heard you and read you talking about your work as, I'm more interested in what the presences and energies and vectors are doing kind of with each other, so in a way then we become a little bit more like visitors, and not necessarily the central invited guest, and are instead yeah, not so much the directly addressed of the work, but matter amongst matter, maybe what's important is that things are passing through us, conduce through us, and part of the material. So I'm curious whether that resonates with the unnamed of what happens by repetition.
Yeah. Your question kind of reminds me of being a child and going to sleep and then imagining what the dolls would be saying to each other as I was sleeping. So another conversation happens apart from me, but all of them have a relationship with the house, with the trees outside, and what is everything else I'm doing whilst I'm not in the center. Yeah, sure. uh, yeah, sure. Yeah, because there's so many, I guess, agencies at work apart from us, or who also act through us, with us, through us. Yeah, all these collaborations that happen continuously through different times and generations as well. Yeah, perhaps also even the question of who is viewing which generation in us, and if we also carry all these generations as we partake in viewing the work, a work that then addresses an event or several events that happen at a particular time. Yeah, that we then also involve all our memories, ancestral memories, also those come forth, those also partake, and hopefully also then the water also moves what needs to be moved, what needs to be pushed aside, or what other conversations can happen. What often happens, going back to the question of dreaming that you asked before, that several people who are involved in the show also end up dreaming in the process of installing the work. So I also hope that the participants, the viewers who engage with the work, also then dream, even though I might not hear of the dreams at times, but I believe that there's exchanges that happen beyond me, or beyond the space of MoMA, or whichever space holds the work at that time. That it's a facilitation of a bridge through something else. Yeah. Mm. Mm.
Martha, I'm so curious about
Yeah, Dineo, I'm so glad you brought it back to kind of collaboration moving into the dream space, because until you mentioned that, I had forgotten about some of those instances that developed in the MoMA exhibition, but it of course was on a practical level a large collaboration, just extending to collaborations with our fabricators as well, right, who are in conversation with you about how and where to source materials. And there was a necessity of thinking together and being on the same page there. And then also in terms of kind of the collective physical labor that then, becomes collective intellectual labor that maybe lives in that kind of dream space or collective space that's somehow outside of us as well.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Thank you, Jill, for that extension. And thank you both for your answers here. So our last question before our poetry reading today will be from Eleanor, and you can go ahead.
Thanks, Carolyn, and thank you so much, Jill and Martha and Dineo. This has been such a rich, beautiful conversation, and I have a lot of things I've been thinking about, and I'm going to try to formulate it into kind of a conversation, question. It's sort of an extension of what Martha maybe started to bring up, but I'm really curious to hear more about from you, Dineo, the process of gathering the materials and bringing them into the space of like an institution like MoMA, and especially in thinking about what we've heard about the memories contained in the natural objects and elements. And also, Martha, if you want to speak at all a little more in depth about from more maybe the museum kind of perspective, curatorial perspective of having maybe slightly more unorthodox materials in the space for this work, if that makes sense at all. But yeah, I guess it's about memory and it's about materials and gathering, and how were you thinking about them, the materials in conversation with each other?
I guess also gathering which work is to be shown in a space, the conversation that happened between MoMA and myself and Secession gallery that represents my work. Trying to figure that out and then arriving at a work which would be fit for the space. And in that, being directed towards certain materials that that must become a part of the process or the engagement. Trusting also the teams that are brought in by MoMA as well. Also trusting that there's also other energies that are also directing that conversation. If for instance, with the dreaming that happened, were people at different parts of the process. I can't remember what the other part of the question.
Maybe one thing I'll add that I feel like was less visible to you, Dineo, because it happened before you came on site to work with us for install or conversations with our conservation team. And of course, I'm grateful at this point to have benefited from work that's been done at the museum by other curators and artists who have worked with organic material. So this was not the first time necessarily that soil was being brought into the space, or natural materials in a new work were being brought into the museum. But of course, we did have conversations about how to ensure that the museum and collection remained safe from things like bugs or other elements that could possibly be brought in when you are sourcing soil and using it actively in an installation. But our conservators are incredibly open-minded and on board and happy to have those conversations with us.
Wonderful. Thank you, Eleanor, for that question, and thank you all again for this conversation today. So here at the Rail, we have a tradition of ending our events with a poetry reading, and I am so thrilled to welcome our poet laureate of the day, Gabriel Ramirez, here to the stage. Gabriel Ramirez is a queer Afro-Latinx writer, performer, and educator. Ramirez is a 2023 Gregory Djanikian Scholar in Poetry at A Droit Journal and has received several fellowships. He is a graduate fellow at the Watering Hole and a participant in the Callaloo Writers Workshops. You can find his work in publications such as BOM, Acentos Review, and many others. And thank you so much, Gabriel, for joining us today. I'm going to pass it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Dineo, for your incredibly generous, gorgeous diasporic work. I currently live in Philadelphia, but hope to make it to New York to see the exhibition and just like be in the moment. Yeah, it was giving triptych. It was giving trip. Like thank you so much. It was so beautiful. And thinking a lot. It brought up a lot of thoughts on family, as well as dreaming. As someone who is a lucid dreamer myself, and thinking about how I was just talking to my best friend recently about how when it comes to like writing about my dreams, I kind of stopped saying in a dream I had, like in my poems. So I'll be reading work from there. And yeah, this is from my manuscript in progress, The Blooming. So thank you so much for having me. Really excited to read these poems for y'all. And yeah, also, some content warnings on grief, familial loss, and like, stuff like that. Cool. I'll be reading 2 poems. Okay, here we go. Pops was beaming like he won the Mega Millions, the numbers of his birthday making the ticket the right one, the only one. Pop's hair was thick with glow, no grease, front door still open. A frog or leaf or bird or mosquito could have easily joined the family. Hugging Pops how I would when the truth was kept from me. When we lived in Surfside, an exciting walk from the beach, boogie boards, footballs, fireworks, and root beer. I hold my trunks while Pops pressed the shower to rinse the sand off my adolescent body as beachgoers entered. I wasn't embarrassed. I was a child and loved when he laughed. Summers in Florida was the only time I saw him. I'm still hugging Pops, and I can't see it, but I know he's smiling words when he says, "My baby boy," kissing the top of my head, the only way a father could after not seeing his son for 8 years. I almost apologize to you for mistaking Pops for someone who is like my mother, for almost telling you I didn't know what made him happy. I never saw Pops buy a lottery ticket, never looked for something so he could scratch at probability. His sons made him happy. The last time we were all in the same room was his funeral. Before then, tires peeling, forks tapping, doors slamming. I inherit the illusion of disappearing, the verb of it, the reinventing myth of being here, then a concern. Pops was in a healthy body, so it couldn't have been his. Chemo weakened his heart into a liver, gave him a year and a half if he was lucky, but he was my Pops. We don't know if he actually wanted to be cremated, but his ashes are in a box in Kissimmee. I wouldn't say he's at peace. I would say he gets to be with his sons wherever we are, and death was the winning ticket. And this next poem, it was the first poem I was able to write in 2018, after having lost my father in March and then my grandmother in June. Pops dead 4 months. Remembering Pops taught me to float on my back, watching moonlight on my Delta flight after leaving Abuela Ana's casket with abuelos in Santiago, Dominican Republic. I'd be lying if I didn't feel their hands, stacked and securing my neck and spine. I got this ease with grief, cry all I need to, not all I want to. Deep breaths, cups brimming with water. I feel furthest from abuelo. The God I had then ain't the ancestors I have now. I keep baby's breaths for everyone I hold in the heaven of my brain, gorilla taped and lining the sarong my sister Monica gifted me. I tell you, if a flower could be a casket, my therapist helps me see I got things about family and consistency, how love should have and should look. Everything isn't my fault. I love people to see what brilliant light love could have made of me. All I am is from grief, defense mechanism, joy and smile and laugh and dance and hope, thinking about getting a baby's breath tattooed under my eye, imagining how fresh it'll look every time I cry, thinking about how it's been 4 months since Pops died and the 4 ulcers they found in Mommy's stomach the morning of Abuela Ana's viewing, and how Mommy couldn't come to Santiago to see her parents be together again. I tell you, if death isn't what makes a family. Thank y'all.
Wow. Gabriel, thank you so much for closing us out today. It's really just more than an honor to listen to you and to listen to you, Dineo, Martha, and Jill today. Thank you. We here at the Rail also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art for sponsoring our NSE program and making these daily conversations possible, and for their support of our archive. Today's conversation has been recorded. You can view it on our YouTube channel and website shortly. For the past 22 years, the Brooklyn Rail has provided a platform for the arts, culture, and politics through our free monthly publication and public events like our daily NSE. You can check the chat for a link to donate. And join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a poetry reading featuring Tanaya Nasser Frederick and David Larson. And as is tradition here, you can now turn on your microphones and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you all again so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
That was so beautiful.
Hear the
Thank
heartbeat.
Such a special
Thank you.
conversation.
That was amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thanks,
you.
Jill.
And
Thank
go
you,
see the
Martha.
show at MoMA.
Thank you,
We
Dineo. That
will,
was
for sure.
amazing. Gabriel, that was such a beautiful reading. Thank you.
Oh,
That was
thank you,
beautiful.
Gabrielle. That was so beautiful.
So beautiful.
Oh, if death doesn't make a family. Or if
Yeah.
death makes a family.
powerful.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.
Take care, everybody.